Hello, welcome back to a timey-wimey pod where we watch every episode of Doctor Who from 2005 onwards. My name is Rebecca.
I'm Haley.
Today we are discussing Series 1, Episode 6, Dalek.
Oh my gosh, I have been waiting literally all day to
Me
talk
too.
about this episode because it is so good and there's so much I have to say.
Might be one of the best Dalek stories of the whole show.
No, fully agree.
Yeah,
Fully agree.
a few episodes ago, we talked about hide behind the couch moments, and this is, I want to say, really the only time I had watching Doctor Who that I had a hide behind the couch moment. Like the first time I watched this episode, I found the Dalek to be genuinely scary. And usually, like Doctor Who is known for its creepy creatures, but I don't really find it scary, personally. But this episode, I did find scary, especially we'll get to it when they get to the stairs. But yeah, there. So this is a great episode.
This wasn't really a hide behind the couch moment for me at any part in this episode. I will tell you, my first hide behind the couch moment isn't until series 2, so we still have a ways
Oh.
to go. Um, but this episode it does have scary parts in it, I'm not gonna lie.
Mhm. Would you like to hear some fun facts?
I would love to.
So, in earlier drafts of this episode, Adam, who we meet, was going to be Mr. Van Statten's son. He was going to have a wife, and Adam would be their son. So, I'm kind of glad they changed that. I just don't think that would have made sense for their dynamic.
Yeah, it wouldn't have made sense also. Wouldn't they have oh my gosh, they would have gotten a different actor. I was like, "But why would the son have a British accent?" Ignore
Yeah,
me, guys.
they probably wouldn't have him have a British accent, or they would have cast someone else or something. Moving on. Second fun fact, Robert Sherman, who wrote this episode, when he was writing it, he asked his girlfriend at the time what she thought were the silliest things about the Daleks. And she said stuff like how it couldn't see behind itself, or it had like a plunger, and that it couldn't go upstairs. So after having that conversation, he decided to change the Daleks a little bit so that it could do those things that we previously couldn't see, to like subvert expectations. And I think that was a really good move, a good move, and I think it really works in this episode.
I completely agree. Later on in this episode, we witness the Dalek being able to like literally fly and like ascend the staircase. And that's definitely like a creepy, spooky moment when that
Hmm.
happens. So that's honestly really cool that he had that discussion with her at that time and he really took what she said into consideration.
Definitely. My third and final fact, get ready. This is a doozy. So,
Oh
Robert
no.
Sherman had to write two versions of the script because when they were bringing back the show, they didn't know if they would have the rights to the Daleks because they are owned by another property, someone's estate, or they were at the time. I'm not sure. So they didn't know if they were going to get the rights for the Daleks. So he wrote an alternate script with a creature akin to a sadistic child that was a mutated version of humanity at the end of the universe, and they would be called the Toclafane.
Stop it right now.
I'm
Stop
dead
it.
serious.
That is wild to me that the Toclafane could have been in series 1 instead of series 3.
I know. And if they never got the rights to the Daleks, they would have essentially become the new Daleks. So think of every episode of the Dalek, it would have been the Toclafane. They wouldn't have just been like a one off villain in Sound of the Drum, or not even a villain, but a one off creature in Sound of the Drums. They would have been they would have become the Doctor's arch nemesis throughout the whole show, and we would never have the Dalek. We would just have the Toclafane.
Look, I hate the Daleks. I have so much beef with the Daleks. I get very mad at them. So much, Rebecca knows this. I go into long rants about them. However, I would not have been able to withstand the Talclifane.
Oh, me
Be a
either.
consistent villain, like an enemy, villain, just like any part. Like, I think I'm good with him being in series 3, and I don't really want to see them again.
I completely agree. They work in series 3, but I'm glad they are not a consistent character in the show.
Fully, fully agree.
All right, so let's just jump into it.
Yes, so where are we in this episode?
We are in the year 2012. Rose
Long
mentions
live
that
2012.
I
Sorry.
know. It makes me kind of sad to watch episodes where it's like we're in the future, but it's like the past now.
Mhm.
um Rose mentions she would be 26, and it had me thinking like what was going on in 2012. And by the time in the Doctor Who universe, we had Matt Smith. It was in like series 6. So all that was going on in 2012 while Rose and Nine are being attacked by a Dalek.
That is so wild.
I love when the Dalek sees, or not the Dalek. I love when the Doctor sees the classic Cyberman head. Such a good moment and such a great teaser for a villain that we don't see until series 2. And it's almost like a sad moment. It's like he's like, "Oh, one of my arch nemesis or is in a museum. I'm getting old." It's something's kind of sad about that moment, but I always really like it.
It is. I like that moment. It's a very melancholy feeling that we kind of witnessed the doctor having about it. And yeah, this is like you're right, like this is our first mention and like portrayal of the Cybermen and the revival.
I also wanted to mention the reason that they kind of ended up in this underground museum. The doctor said that there was a signal that was drawing the TARDIS in. I love when all the soldiers come in and Rose says something like, "Well, if they're collecting aliens, they got you." And I'm like, "Rose, why would you expose him like that right there in front of everyone?"
Yeah, she shouldn't have said that. It was not a smart moment to say that for sure.
Like I get wanting to have that line in the episode to kind of like nail the sentiment home, I guess. But it just, when I was watching it, I was like, okay. And then after the intro, we get another Bad Wolf reference.
We do. There is a helicopter landing and it says Bad Wolf 1 descending.
This one is probably one of the more obvious references, and yet I didn't notice it for a long, long, long time.
That's so funny. I think I've always noticed it, but like we've mentioned before in previous episodes, when we were watching this series for the first time, like all of the Bad Wolf mentions, we noticed them, but like kind of flew over our heads. Like we didn't connect the dots.
Exactly. And then we get to meet Mr. Van Staten, who is basically claims he's clearly an American. He claims he owned the internet. Apparently, he was kind of inspired by Bill Gates, funny enough.
Yeah, I did see that fact come up in a review I found. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Mr. Van Staten, and I love his ending.
His ending is very fitting for his character, and I I literally sent Rebecca a whole Instagram rant last night about Henry Van Satin, but I unsent it because then we wouldn't talk about it in the podcast and you guys would miss like a snippet of the conversation. But like Henry Van Satin, I just want to honestly punch that man. Like he is so horrible in this episode, and I he's wealthy, he's powerful, he's annoying, he's egotistical and controlling. He's the biggest red flag if I've ever seen one.
He is the worst. He literally puts the Dalek in front of everyone else, telling people not to shoot at it. He literally like tortures the doctor, tortures the Dalek. He treats everyone terribly. When he fires his employees, he wipes their memory
Yeah.
and leaves them for death, essentially.
Yeah, like in the beginning of this episode, we see an employee say something he didn't like. So he fired the employee and said, like, wipe his memory and drop him off somewhere that starts with an M. I don't care where, just somewhere that starts with an M, which, like, so specific, but also, like, this is awful.
Yeah, and I love when that gets kind of brought back at the end. And then I love the scene in his office when they're going through all like the alien stuff and they find the musical instrument and the doctor shows him how to play it. And I love that scene. It sounds so good. It's so like interesting. And then he just throws it away, tosses it to the side.
Nine also kind of says at some point in this episode, I don't remember exactly when, I can't remember if it's in this scene or one of the next ones, but he says, so you're just an expert in everything except the things in your museum. Anything you don't understand, you lock up. And it is such a zing to Henry Van
Mm,
Staten.
very true. Later on in the episode, we'll talk about it again, but I love when the doctor says, "You're not trying to touch the stars, you're trying to grab them and put them deep below the earth." And yeah, that's
Yeah,
such a good line.
such a great, such a great line.
Yeah. And then we hear that Mr. Van Staten has something locked up, something in a cage. And they take Rose, for some reason, has to go hang out with Adam, poor Rose. And they take the doctor to go see what they have.
Yeah, and this scene always gets me because you have nine go into this essentially torture chamber for this creature he doesn't even know what it is until like he goes to it and realizes that it's a Dalek. And Christopher Eccleston's acting in this scene in particular is one of his best performances in the show, if not his best. As soon as Nine realizes that there's a Dalek in front of him, the immediate terror he has is palpable and full of so much trauma. And when he realizes the Dalek can't exterminate and isn't working properly, he literally goes mad, shouting fantastic and taunting it. He learns like the Dalek is waiting for orders, which for the first few times, and sometimes even now, I watched it, it was so sad to me. And we learned not only did the Doctor witness all the Daleks dying, and his people burn, he made it happen because he had no choice. And we see him say, everyone lost. And the Dalek replied, but the coward survived. And we get a callback to this specific line about the coward surviving at the end of series one. And we'll talk about it then once we get there in this podcast. But I noticed that for the first time in this episode and this watch of it. And it hit me hard for sure. Nine also says that in response to that, that he caught the way Christopher Eccleston says this is kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but it just like has a grip on me. The way he says, oh, but I caught your little signal. Help me, poor little thing. And that's when he says, there's no one coming for you. He And the Dalek says, I'm alone in the universe. And Nine is like, yep, all happy and smiling. And right as the Dalek says, so are you, Nine realizes that immediately and he hates it. And then almost immediately he says, exterminate. And then he goes and tries to electrocute and kill this Dalek. And watching this scene for the first time in my first watch, I felt so bad for the Dalek. I was like, what is going on? Like, the doctor is being so cruel. This isn't the doctor I've known. But now that I've seen it a few times and I've analyzed it a lot, there is so much there and I understand why he did it. Do I agree with it? Not really, but this scene I can create a whole essay on alone.
I completely agree. The scene is so good. There's so many lines. Like I love when he says, "I made it happen." Like he delivers that line so well. Christopher Eccleston was acting like the fridge was empty, the baby was crying, rent was due, and you can tell. It's so good. And your point about how he treats the Dalek. It is very jarring the first time you watch it, especially for those of us who didn't watch Classic Who first and weren't familiar with the dynamic between the Doctor and the Daleks. We kind of watch it through Rose's eyes almost. Like she knows the Dalek is bad, but she doesn't fully understand what it is, what the Daleks are, and thinks it could change. And over time we see the Daleks keep going. They every time you we think we killed the last of the Daleks, there's like 20 million more behind it. They're like cockroaches. But it's the dynamic between the characters are so interesting in this episode, and the dialogue between the Dalek and the Doctor in that scene is just so good.
It is so good. And of course, Henry Van Staten is watching this whole ordeal. He finds out the Dalek is the Dalek and the Doctor is a Time Lord. And so, being on his annoying ego shtick again, he gets the Doctor out of there and then he brings the Doctor to another torture chamber and tortures the Doctor because he just wants it all. He just wants it all. He thinks he is the best thing to ever happen, which he's obviously not. And he also instructs his employee to drill the Dalek and torture the Dalek and do whatever it takes to make it talk again.
Yeah, and seeing him like tie up and torture the doctor is really hard. And something I noticed in this episode for the first time that I previously just had never thought about is Rose had no idea any of this was happening. She doesn't talk to the doctor again until he's no longer tied up and he's back, and she just had no idea that any of that was going on.
Yeah, and she doesn't even I don't think she knows after the fact unless
No.
Nine told her.
Yeah, which
Which I feel
if
like
so
this
we
is
don't
something.
see.
Yeah, if so, we don't see it. And I feel like this is one of those things he would file and like keep to himself.
Yeah, I can't imagine they would have a conversation about that. But
Mm-mm.
meantime, Rose's hair looks so good in this episode. I'm obsessed with it. And she has to sit through Adam mansplaining the universe. I love how he's like, this is gonna sound crazy, but like, Rose, there's things that we don't know. There's like aliens out there. And she's like, wow, that's so crazy.
He really thinks he's everything and
Oh
showing
yeah.
off. And
Yeah.
little does he know what's about to happen.
And then he mentions that he's a genius, which is something I think they kind of forgot about in the next episode. Not to speak
Yeah.
ahead, but uh yeah, apparently he's a genius. I wrote in my notes, I say for being a genius, he's an idiot.
Um accurate. Accurate. Again, not to speak ahead, but this isn't the first episode we have with it. Or sorry, this is the first episode. I meant this isn't the only episode we have with him and you are correct.
Yeah. I also it annoyed me when he like just met Rose and then he was like, so you and the doctor, and she's like, no, we're just friends, and he's like, good, and she's like, why is that good? I'm like, you just met her, you don't know anything about her, and you're like, good, glad you're single.
Yeah, like, why? I mean, I know why, but also, well, why is that, like, one of the first things he has to ask? Why not, like, ask about her?
He knows nothing else about her except that she's British and is traveling with a man named the Doctor. Those are the only things he knows about Rose. So then Rose and Adam go to see the Dalek. Somehow they get past all the guards and are allowed to go in. And this scene of Rose meeting the Dalek before she knows anything about it, she doesn't know the Doctor's connection to the Dalek. It is just, oh, it's so painful because Rose, we love Rose. She's so human. She's so kind. She's so caring. And I actually feel for the Dalek in this scene too.
Yeah, this scene always makes me feel for the Dalek. Even though I don't like the Daleks, it's like this particular Dalek. And just the kindness that Rose brings in and asks if the Dalek is okay and if it's in pain and like if there's anything she can do. I noticed watching this episode that she mentions in the beginning that her name is Rose and that she has a friend called the Doctor who can help. And it almost makes me wonder, like, was the Dalek playing on this sympathy because he knew she was connected to the Doctor? Or was he truly like feeling all of that? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like,
I do, and I was wondering that too while rewatching this, and I'm not sure to be honest.
yeah, because we learn later in the episode because Rose eventually like to comfort the Dalek touches the Dalek and that because she has basically like a special type of energy or something from traveling with the Doctor that regenerates the Dalek and that's what we learn towards the end of this episode. And so obviously the Dalek wasn't doing well, but I'm just curious how much how much the Dalek played Rose in terms of sympathy. Like, you know, like two things can be true. The Dalek could have been dying and could have been it and like was in pain obviously, but the Dalek was acting a little too nice looking back.
Yeah, a little too beaten down, but only Rose Tyler could make a Dalek feel emotions and feel humanity and feel pain and feel fear, and that's the power of Rose Tyler right there.
It is the power of Rose Tyler because the Dalek asks her in that moment, "Do you fear me?" And Rose says, "No." And the Dalek basically says, "Everyone fears me." And that gets Rose to touch the Dalek even more and just like, ugh, only
Ugh,
her. Only
only
her.
Yeah, and the second she touches it, because she's a time traveler, it kind of regenerates the Dalek almost. He was beaten down. He didn't have his powers, for lack of a better term. Uh, but then he kind of has life again and is able to break through, and that's when everything goes even more downhill than it already was.
And then the Dalek just starts murdering people left and right. And even before this point, before like the Dalek got free, because once like you said, like the Dalek regenerated. Once that happened, it like broke out of its chains, and that's like how it got out, and it started exterminating again and able to kill people. So the Dalek murdered a ton of people, but even before that point, the Doctor kept warning Henry Van Staten to like kill the Dalek and get rid of the Dalek because the Dalek will kill. That the Dalek has hate. That's the only emotion. And Van Staten, of course, didn't want a scratch on the Dalek because it's one of a kind and humans are dispensable, which says all you need to know about this guy.
Yeah, definitely. Uh, so then the Dalek breaks free, and Rose and Adam are they have to run. Someone is sent with them to try to like get them out, uh, and we see them kind of like running away. I love when the Dalek gets to the sprinklers. First we see the Dalek get to the stairs, and Rose, Adam, and the woman they're with, I forget her name, they stop at the stairs and kind of wait Which when I was watching this, I was like, "Don't wait, just keep going, keep running." But it is
I
such a
know.
haunting scene.
It
They
is.
think the Dalek's not going to be able to get up the stairs, and then it's elevate. It's such a good scene.
Such a good scene. And also, Elevate, so creepy.
Definitely. And even more creepy is when it sets off the sprinklers and while the soldiers are trying to shoot it, trying to kill it, and it sets off the sprinklers, making their guns useless, and then electrocuting all of them and making the doctor, Mr. Van Staten, and everyone else watch. Such a haunting scene, such a good scene.
It's intense for sure.
And this is really when everything changes. I think even after watching that, Mr. Van Staten is like, "Oh, okay, this is bad. We have to like lock up the building. Like we have to stop this. We have to close off the bunker and before it gets out."
Yeah, and then we get a scene where the doctor is talking to the Dalek, and the Dalek keeps saying, like, I'm awaiting orders, because they're very much like, they're not like a one solo man on a mission type of race. Like, they are in a cluster of hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions and billions. So the doctor is like, "Well, here's your new order, kill yourself." And then the Dalek, because like the doctor just like wants the Dalek gone, he has so much trauma from the Daleks, and the Dalek in response says, "You would make a good Dalek."
And that
That is a gut punch.
gut punch. And that is a line that is kind of weaved in throughout the show uh for a long time. It that's not the last we kind of that's not the last time we hear that line or a similar line, and it is such a gut punch.
Yeah, it really is. And like I said, like when I watched this episode for the first time, it was jarring the entire way through, and it was even more jarring to hear the Dalek say that and be like, he does sound like a Dalek
Hmm.
in that moment.
And Rose even calls him out for it later on in the episode.
Yeah. And then there's another scene, and the bulkheads are closing, I guess. Like
Mm.
Van Staten hacks in, makes them close to hopefully lock the Dalek like down away from everyone else so it wouldn't get out and wouldn't start killing people in, Utah and then the US and then the whole world basically.
And
Um
because there's limited power, they can't really they have to use the power that they have to close the bulkhead, and they can't really wait.
yeah, so Rose and Adam are both running as fast as they can to basically get like under this like door before it closed, and Adam makes it, but Rose doesn't. She wasn't fast enough, so she gets cornered into a wall by the Dalek. And all we hear, we don't see her. We see the doctor and Van Staten in that whole scene. And all we hear is the Dalek saying, exterminate. And we think Rose dies. But right before that moment, Rose says to the doctor on her phone, see you then, doctor. It wasn't your fault. Remember that. You know what? And you know what? I wouldn't have missed it for the world.
I love this whole scene. I love when she says, "Sorry, I was a bit slow." Like, oh, a gut punch. And yeah, what her saying, "See you then," I wouldn't have missed it for the world. Telling him it wasn't his fault. Like she already knows him so well to know that he it would blame himself for this. He would blame her himself for taking her there, for not stopping it. And she already like they just have such a good bond where she says, I it does like I wouldn't have missed it. Like don't it's just it's so good.
It
Also,
is so good.
I hate Adam. Why didn't he not try to wait? Like, why didn't he do anything?
Literally, that was my thought as well. I'm like, okay, why? Like, he should have been in the back of rows. I know it's like every man for themselves, but in a situation like this, but like, I don't care. Like, if you're a man, you always let the lady go first. You let the kid go first, the older person go first, like, whoever, like,
Women and children. Like, what are
women
you
and children.
doing? What
What
even
were
just
you
like
doing?
he should have like grabbed her hand and like to help her just run faster. Like he could have done a million things and he just left her behind.
Yeah, like, he could have at the very least been there to, like, support her and encourage her and be like, "You got it, you got it." Like, he
You're
didn't
almost
do the bare
there. No,
minimum.
he did nothing. And the doctor's reaction when he thinks Rose is dead, uh heartbreaking. My heart broken.
Yeah, and he is mad pissed at Van Statten.
Mhm.
He gives Van Statten
And
the riot
Adam.
act, and Adam, yeah. Rightfully so. They deserved it.
Yeah, I love uh, uh everything. It's such a good scene. And then the Dalek temporarily fixes the communication so they can see the Dalek, and it's revealed because you can't keep Rose Tyler down for long. She's alive.
She is alive.
And the Dalek says, "Open the bulkhead or kill the woman you love." And I just love that line so much because the Dalek hasn't even seen Rose and the Doctor together at this point. He doesn't know anything that's going on, and he's already Dr. Rose shipper, and I love it.
I love it, and the doctor is like, "She nearly died once. I am not letting it happen again," and
I love that.
he such a girl boss moment.
Hmm.
So he made Van Satin or no, he didn't even make Van Satin. He himself opened up all the bulkheads.
And I love how he can. He even the doctor can kind of see at this point some there because Rose brought the Dalek back. There's a reason the Dalek didn't kill her.
And the reason is it's because the Dalek can feel Rose's fear when it went to exterminate her.
Mm,
And that is terrifying for a Dalek because the only emotion Daleks are bred to have is hate, and any other emotion Daleks freak out at
hmm.
because that means there's something up.
At this point, the Doctor and Adam they try to go find some alien weapons that they have lying about this underground dungeon, and we see the Dalek and Rose with Mr. Van Staten, and Rose stops the Dalek from killing him. And she says, you know, you don't have to do this anymore. Like, there's no reason to keep killing. There has to be something else. And the Dalek says, freedom. That's what he wants.
Yeah, which I remember watching this when I first saw this episode and very confused. I'm like, what does freedom mean? And then the Dalek goes to, I want to say it has to be like the first floor, right? Because the Dalek was able to make like a hole in the cement so it could feel the sunlight. And then the Dalek itself opens up and reveals the creature inside, which seeing this for the first time, kind of crazy, I'm not gonna lie, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
creepy.
Definitely. I'm glad they showed this at the end. It because it doesn't. It's not what you expected from the inside of the Dalek, and it's very creepy. But also, like, it's so small. Like, it's so helpless in this moment.
Yeah, and then we see in this moment that like it's almost like melting, it looks like once it
Hmm.
starts feeling the sunlight.
I love when he shoots a hole through the ceiling, And Rose is like, "You did it. You're free." Like she's a little too happy that this mass killing machine is now free. Like it's very sweet, but also like, no, Rose, that's not what we're doing.
Yeah, it's not what we want, and right as that's happening, 9 comes running in with, like, this alien gun contraption aimed straight for the Dalek, and he tells Rose to move, and Rose is like, "No, I'm not gonna let you kill it," and the doctor's like, "But it's going to continue to kill," and Rose says to him that the Dalek isn't the one pointing a gun at me. And then 9, you see he's, like, frantic almost, like, he's
Hmm.
insisting that, like, he has to end it, like, this is the only way. The only way to end all of this is to kill the Dalek, which, like, in any other episode, I would be like, "Oh, definitely." But in this episode, that wasn't the way to go.
Yeah, I the way he plays that scene is so good. Like he kind of realizes for a second what he was about to do and how almost helpless the Dalek is, and it is changing. And he's like realizes what he was about to do and what he was about to destroy.
Yeah, and in response to Rose, it's, like, this dramatic moment, and the way he says it is dramatic,
Hmm.
in a good way, by the way. He says, like, "I couldn't. Like, I wasn't. Oh, Rose, they're all dead." And when I heard that the first time, I assumed he meant everyone the Dalek had killed that day in the museum, but
Hmm.
now I'm like, he has to be referencing Gallifrey and, like, the end of the Time War.
I thought the same thing in this rewatch. Like, they're old. Like he almost. It's almost like earlier when he told the Dalek, like, "There's no point. There's no orders coming." He kind of had that moment as well. Like, what's the point? Why are we like? He realized he was still fighting the Time War, and for what? They're all gone. They're all dead.
Yeah, and it is just a very it's like it is an emotional moment, and the Dalek asks, "Why do we survive?" And Nine says, "I don't know." And it's like in this moment, it's like, wow, they have that similarity and that they feel similarly in that moment, and especially the Dalek because the Dalek is like has mutated, we learned, into a Dalek human hybrid, which unfortunately for the Dalek is extraordinarily painful.
Yeah, because of this, it would rather die than have these emotions be this mutation because the Daleks see anything that is not pure Dalek as bad and something that must be exterminated. So, because of that, I love how he has to ask Rose for the orders. He can't just, you know, kill himself without Rose giving him the orders, and she doesn't want to do it. But I think she kind of realizes it's almost a kindness to give him the orders to do that.
Yeah, and I find it really powerful that it was her who gave the Dalek the orders to kill itself, and it wasn't the doctor at all.
Definitely, it really just shows because she brought this Dalek back to life. Essentially, it she has become its kind of master almost unintentionally, and there's like a connection there, and he can't get orders from anywhere else, so he has to get them from Rose.
Yeah, and it's an emotional scene, and in the past, I've definitely cried during this
Mm,
moment when the Dalek kills itself.
it's very emotional. uh yeah, it's a great scene. It's really the only time, or one of few times, that we really feel for the Dalek. We really are almost sad about it, and it is just such a great ending to the episode.
It is, and both Nine and Rose, I mean, Nine mainly more than Rose, but both of them did go through it in this episode.
Definitely.
I love the end of this episode. We have Diana Goddard, who works for Henry Van Satin, basically take control after all of this.
Yeah, she does exactly what we saw Mr. Van Staten do to his employee. She's like, wipe his memory, put him in a city that starts with an S. And then we hear from Adam that she closes up the whole bunker. Like she's sealing it with cement. Everything that they were doing, it's all going to be gone.
And it is just such a great, like, vigilante moment. Like, it is such a good moment.
Definitely. There's one moment where Rose and the doctor are talking, and Rose says, that Dalek survived. Maybe some of your people did too. And all I'm going to say is Rose was ahead of her time. She was ahead of her
She was
time.
a she was ahead of her time. She really went with her gut feeling, and that gut feeling was right. 2 s K okay, she predicted this 2 seasons in advance. Only Rose Tyler.
Only Rose Tyler could do that. And then we see Adam meet back up with the doctor and Rose. He tells them that it's being sealed off, that they need to go. And I love that the doctor and Rose kind of have this conversation about him right in front of him. Rose is like, Adam always wanted to see the stars. And the doctor makes some comment about how he looks. And Rose is like, oh, I didn't notice. And they kind of have this whole like debate and conversation right in front of him. And it just made me laugh. I love it.
Yeah, it is. It's funny. And then we see Adam, the doctor relents, and Adam goes with the doctor and Rose, and they all walk into the TARDIS. And that's the official end of the episode. So Adam is an technically a companion, but me and Rebecca both strongly agree he does not count.
No, this doesn't count as all at all to me. Like, yes,
No,
he technically gets to travel in the TARDIS, and technically that makes you a companion, but no, not in this case, not for Adam,
not for Adam. But yeah, next week we get to see Adam again.
unfortunately. Do you have any reviews of this episode?
I do have reviews. So let me enlarge this because I am blind. But courtesy again of the Wayback Machine, shout out to you. You're great.
Love you.
The Times said tonight's episode about Daleks, the Times says, tonight's episode may not have the zany, off the wall humor associated with the ones written by Russell T Davies, but Robert Sherman's script, and I can't believe that I'm about to say this, is strangely moving. It concerns the last surviving Dalek, which is being held in chains in an underground museum in Utah. Daleks, as we know from the lessons of history, are programmed to hate. But amid all the excitement, tonight's episode manages to sneak in a message about the redemptive power of human kindness and the way in which victims can turn into oppressors. This new Doctor Who is an unqualified triumph. The London Evening Standard said, this week's episode title, Dalek, may crush the surprise the script clearly hoped to generate around the return of the killer pepper pot. But that's the only disappointment here. At its best, science fiction is supposed to be a metaphor. It's not a theory that always pans out, but here in the conflict between a murderous intergalactic dustbin and a double hearted tribe time traveler, we get a powerful look at the way war, whether it's in the Balkans, Iraq, or outer space, twists even the best of people. If you can't kill, then what are you good for? The doctor hisses at the imprisoned Dalek. But by the end, you're left wondering whether it is the Dalek or the doctor who has been damaged most by the conflict. It's heady, surprising, spiky, and occasionally pretentious stuff, but I'll take this over ITV spandex celeb grappling any Saturday night.
I Most of the reviews we've read so far have been fairly critical of these early episodes. Uh
Hmm.
and you can tell this one is one that people really loved, and it's easy to see why. This episode is very powerful even all these years later.
100%. And we've talked about so many aspects of the episode, but I just know even when we rewatch this episode in the future, both of us, like, we're gonna have more to add. And that's one of the things that I love about Doctor Who and that I love about this episode in particular is just like you can rewatch it so many times and still come up with new things. And that's one of my favorite things because it just makes everything so much fun.
Me too. I The more you watch it, the more things you notice, the more you understand the characters and what they've gone through, specifically the doctor. Like the more we learn about the Time we War, the heavier this episode makes it. Uh it's great. What is the heart of this episode for you?
The heart of this episode is definitely the relationship between the doctor and this particular Dalek and just how wounded the doctor is. And I think also the heart of this episode is being reminded by Rose that there's another way out, which is to be kind even to a creature who never deserves that kindness, like the Daleks.
I agree. For me, the heart of this episode is the doctor grappling with coming out of the Time War, grappling with survivor's guilt, grappling with the anger of everyone he know being gone, and this Dalek and him surviving. And when he says at the end that he doesn't know why they survive, it's just such a great line, and you can really tell throughout this episode this is a doctor that for a moment slips back into the Time War, is back in that space mentally, and it takes Rose to help him get out of it.
Yeah, you worded that beautifully. You worded that so beautifully and so much better than I did, but I completely agree.
Anything else we want to say about Dalek?
No, I want to say that is it. And next week, we will be back talking about the long game,
The long game.
which sets us up for more later on in this series.
Right. Well, thank you all again for listening to another episode of a Timey Wimey Pod.
As always, if you have any questions, comments, rants, concerns, anything and everything under the sun, email us at timeywimePod@gmail.com or follow us at timeywimePod on Instagram.
And Timey Wimey Pod on TikTok. And we will see you next week.
Yes, we will. Bye, guys.